So this is the Maimon, the second day of Sukkot, in the Sukkot, obviously. Yeah, Tavshin Chaf Aleph. It's a hemshech to the Maimon of Rosh Hashanah. So the Mishnah in Sukkot, in Masechet Sukkot, describes Simchas Beis HaShe'eva, right? The great Simcha that was surrounding the drawing of the water from the Mei HaShiloyach, and then the pouring of the water with the Maimorim over here, the new ones, and the pouring of the water on the Mizbeach each morning with the daily korban atomid, the daily morning korban. So that's a tremendous simcha. We all know that the Gemara says that he who didn't see such a simcha, the simcha of Simchas Beis HaShe'eva, never saw simcha in his life. So the Mishnah describes that Chassidim, ואנשי Maaseh, Chassidim, pious, ואנשי Maaseh, men of good deeds, baraktim b'fneihem, would dance before the people, ba'avuke shel oir shebiyadeihem, with torches of fire in their hands, juggling. Rashi, and Rashi explains, they threw them out and then caught them, they didn't touch, they're juggling. The Araba is either 4 or 8. The Gemara mentions describing describing this juggling, that they used either 4, this one used 4, this one used 8. The Zaydik Zum Makabel Zum. Rashi explains that he throw one and receive the other, and they wouldn't touch. We have to understand the connection between the dancing, they dance and they juggle. The throwing of the juggling of the torches, leading Simchas Beis HaShe'eva to the whole of Simchas Beis HaShe'eva. What's the connection? In the second question, what's the diuk that some used 4, some used 8? We also have to understand now, actually, I sent Zalman a text on this because they're throwing me off here, but the guys who made the Maimon, because in footnote 4, they send you to the Gemara, and I see no such influence whatsoever there. I do see it in the Mishnah. So what do you mean? Anyway, so what's the Mishloshna Gemara Mashma, the Losh of the Gemara, which it seems means the Mishnah, is Sharikud Vazika Sa'avuka Shal Oiru Inyan Echad. It's one thing, the dancing and the juggling, because look what it says. It seems this is what the Rabbi is saying. It says does not say that they danced and they juggled. It says Meraktin Bifneim Ba'avuka Shal. They danced before the people with juggling the torches of fire. So that implies it's not 2 inyanim and 1 inyan. That's whatever it means when he says Lashon Gemara. It doesn't mean the Gemara, it means the Mishnah. Which very clearly includes the Mishnah. It's just, again, that the guys who made the Maimon are a lot more knowledgeable and smarter than me, and they send the reader to the Gemara as opposed to the Mishnah, where I don't see such an inference. At any rate, he did the Talmud, he said, stop it. Okay, but the Chayra, in Beis Yan, B'fnei Atzmo, in the Lashon Ziyah, Gemara as opposed to Mishnah. Gemara does mean Mishnah. Without the footnote, it wouldn't have a problem. It's just the footnote. At any rate, that's, hey, Beis Yan, they're 2 separate things. So why? Shadiko, in dancing is one thing. Vasriku, in Noisef, and juggling is something else. Shrebikiyan, that's a whole different talent. Lizrik Esavuk is to be able to throw juggle the torches. Why are they described as one thing? Comes now next is really a summary of the last of the essence of the previous Maimon, of this, which this Maimon is a hemshech. So let's see it inside. To understand this, you have to preface that which we learned in the previous Maimon. Mashikoso, Kesel Yim Chagenu, To explain the whole unit Kesser of concealment, that the concealment, which is Rosh Hashanah, at the end of the Maamar he said, where does it come to light and reveal Chagenu? Is revealed in Sukkah's Begillah. Now, what's being concealed? Case Aleph, because the word Kesser with the Aleph, that's really the word that we expect the Pasuk to say, which means appointed time. It's written with the Hey to be merames that on this appointed time there's a concealment of the Aleph. So the word actually is written with the Hey because the Aleph is concealed, and that's what the whole Maamar explained, which he now is going to summarize Bekitzer. It's the last two oisios of the previous Maamar, the culmination of it. Rebbe explains in the Siddur, where he writes about the Kavanas Atkiyas. The whole point is that we're talking about the intermediary, the mamutza between Yochid and Echad. In simple words, Eibishter and creation. Intermediary in the sense, not that there's something in between. It's not what it means. Intermediary in the sense that Hashem manifests himself in such a way that we should know, even in creation, that he is Yochid. So he manifests himself and reveals himself in the way of Echad, which begins with the letter Aleph, that conveys and reveals the truth of his exclusivity even to us, notwithstanding the fact that we are locked in the reality of separation, ego, consciousness, etc. As he explains, the Hinei Mevu Besid. So the Aleph is the memutza. Beginning with a physical level, the Aleph is an inarticulated sound. So it's the mutza, it's a sound, but not a particular sound. So it's intermediary between, but still saying, it's the process, beginning of any articulated letter. So it's the memutza between koil, pure sound, the dibur in speech. Likewise, the Maaseh, the Maaseh, the Maidlo Ingen, and Mamutza ben Amaitzel, Latzilus, Aleph is the intermediary between the Maitzel, the emanator, Latzilus, to that which is emanated in the Matzilus. The Mata Yoser, on a lower level, everything repeats endlessly, these models. It's the Mamutza ben Abeidel and Ivroyim. That's the Mamutza between creator and creation. And what is that? And that's in the general sense. So what in general did we say, which he said yet in the previous Maamar, as his first address, as it were, of the Memutza? He said it's Kesser. But then it's explained, Kesser really belongs to the world of the Elyon, of the Maitzel. So in more detail, Kesser in general. But as we get more refined and more specific, it's not Kesser, but rather a Mamutza who Chochma Stima is really Chochma Stima, which is a lower level. As we explained in the previous Maamar, Kesser is really not a Mamutza because it's still bound up with the world of the Elyon, both of its levels of Kesser. Primis HaKesser certainly is removed from the world, from the limitations of creation. Creation means even Atzilus. And even Adich, it's also moved. We explained the parallel of the Nefesh Adam is Rotzen. Shebchinas Makiv, Rotzen is not bound to, defined by any of the Kreiches Premium. Rotzen is not closer to Seichel than it is to Midas. In the hierarchy of the Nefesh, you have Seichel and Midas are lower. The Rotzen is in Makiv. Makiv means it transcends them all equally. The willpower is not more associated with intellect than it is with emotion or any other of the lower faculties of the person. So it's not a memutza because it's in your Makiv. So likewise, Arich, even Kloli, it's a memutza. Kes says a memutza between Ein Sof and Atzilus. But Beprati is Be'emes, it's not, we haven't satisfied our quest for memutza because it still negates and in a sense doesn't relate to the world of creation. Ratzon just mows it all down, and it's not closer to any faculty. So it isn't the memutza. Memutza has to have this empathy and sensitivity and dimension of direct relationship with particulars, at particular levels, and Ratzon doesn't. It's a keich makif. So we need to probe deeper to find the inyan of memutza, and that's the aleph which is concealed and returns to its source every Rosh Hashanah. Every Rosh Hashanah. So what is we following this? Yeah? Yep. So what's the memutza? A step lower, what we're going to find, as he said, properties of the Elyon, but properties of the Tachton as well. Straddling both worlds at itself, and therefore serving as the memutza. And what is that? So already in the words chachma stima, those two words we kind of get it. Because it's chachma. So we are talking about a definition of kind, of sorts. So that's the relationship to creation. It's part of the world of creation. Stima, it's hidden. So there's an aspect of this which is part of the Elyon beyond creation. So in the very words chachma stima, we've found an memutza. There's this and there's that property, which he's going to explain. And near is Aleph, and it's also hinted in the letter Aleph. First of all, he doesn't say it here, but he said in the previous Maimer, Chachma Stima obviously produces Chachma Gluya, which is manifested ideas, sparks, the whole process, intellectual process. It produces it. But at the state of Chachma Stima, it's instead of complete concealment, it's the Koyach HaMaskil, which we'll talk about in a moment. But in the previous Maimer, he said that the word Aleph, aside from its form and picture, which he's now going to address, the meaning of the word Aleph conveys this, because Aleph in Diktuk conveys a future sense. Put an Aleph in front of a verb, it becomes future. As in the pasuk in Iyov, Alefcha Chachma, Alefcha Bina, I will teach you. Simple pshat. Translation, I will teach you. Chachma, I will teach you Bina. It's exactly what Aleph is. From Aleph will come Chachma, will come Bina. It will produce it. But the Aleph itself is still a much more embryonic stage, Chachma Stima. So it's hinted to, or conveyed in the very meaning of the word Aleph. Moreover, in the shape of the word, was that clear? Yeah? Yeah? Moreover, in the shape, Shehu koitz kav koitz. Yeah, if you can listen. Yeah, there's no tissues, but there is.
Tissues are okay?
Yeah, they're also okay, yeah, thank you. But it's right here, there's these, right around the corner, right where the coffee machine used to be. You could bring it. I think your father lost it. But you're okay. So the Aleph, I wanted not to miss. Oh, sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. So the Aleph is Kreitz, Vav, Kreitz, 2 lines on the bottom. So it's a stroke, it points upwards, it's the upper point of the Aleph, it's an inverted Yud. No, it's actually Yud. And then there's the line, and then there's a Kreitz, an Aleph below, that's inverted, with the stroke facing downwards. That's the union of what? Of a memutza, connected to the top, to the bottom, and Namshach in between. As he says, V'nei koitza elyon actual shoydish, the chachmas tima. So the upper stroke, the actual aleph is chachmas tima, that shape. But at the tip, the top of the aleph is the stroke. That's the shoydish of chachmas tima. And what is that? So now we get some hasbara. But the Maaseh ben nefesh Adam, now on page 27, so what's the parallel? What's the source of chachmas tima within the nefesh? Well, koyach hamaskil. What's koyach hamaskil? So we explained, koyach hamaskil is the faculty of the nefesh that can conceive. It can conceive. So koyach haseichel hayuli ha'atzmi shebenefesh. I'm sorry, I didn't read that right. The Maaseh ben nefesh Adam who hashosh the koyach hamaskil. The koyach hamaskil, that's chachmas tima. The koyach hamaskil is chachmas tima. The source of the koyach hamaskil, what's that? Shekoyach haseichel hayuli ha'atzmi shebenefesh. Translation: it's an intellectual faculty because yuli means unformed. Atzmi essential shebenefesh. Shemushul gam inyan haseichel. That's removed even from inyan haseichel. I'll read the words now. We'll soon explain. The koyach hamaskil is removed from mitzias haseichel. Means that the koyach hamaskil. Do you see a particular idea? No. So if you introduce the koyach hamaskil, what are you seeing? Here is a human being, an intellectual being. What? There's no mitzias haseichel there. What's it going to conceive? Endless things, endless subject, endless things. But you can still see inyan haseichel. Not going to see metzias haseichel, a particular idea, but inyan haseichel means an intellectual that will produce, can produce. I can see that this is, it's so articulated there that you can see that it's going to produce seichel. Behind the koyach hamaskil, deeper in the nefesh, he calls it koyach haseichel hayuli ha'atzmi, and that is mushal even from inyan haseichel. So what does this mean? A mushal gashmi given in Chassidus, which we're familiar with. There is a flame. So let's look at a coal, a burning coal. So there is the flames that come out of the coal. That's already manifested fire. So that's like seichel. One mushal, a flame. Then you look at a burning coal, a glowing coal, a glowing coal. So the glowing coal looking, so there's no manifested fire, but it's glowing. That is the koyach hamaskil. It's not metzias of a flame, but the coal is glowing. And you can see directly that from this will be drawn, you can draw a particular flame. And then there's the tzorach halamash itself, not even glowing, just the coal itself. They don't even see the inyan of fire. But if you know this, when it struck, whatever will produce, but it's so removed from its current state that there's no identification of fire at all. It's so latent within it. This kinetic energy, in other words, in the coal, in the stone. The stone, it's the stone, not the coal. The stone, which can produces fire. It doesn't produce other things. It doesn't produce a tree. It produces, so it's a koyach. That's right. It's a koyach haseichel hayuli atzmi. It's a yuli atzmi of seichel. Again, the stone's not going to produce a tree, but it's going to produce seichel. However, there's not even the inyan. Yeah, go on.
You say, like, for example, a baby provided is healthy and everything, although it doesn't have necessarily koyach seichel yet. You can't put together thoughts. He has the koyach yuli atzmi or seichel yuli atzmi. But he's going to.
A newborn, you mean a mission, newborn. No, it's present. Obviously, it's present. It's definitely present. But you ask him, can you see it already in the newborn?
I don't think you can see it in anyone. But
maybe. Maybe emotional using the person would be. The DNA, the raw DNA. Everything is contained there, but you're not going to see any manifestation, any articulation at the DNA level of a particular limb or organ in the body. It's not there in a subtle way. It's there in a purely potential way. But that's the Sech Yuli Atzmi. Then behind the DNA are some other more essential component, that's the component of the DNA.
Could you take the motion that you just did with the stone, number, etc., and associate the words that are in the Bible with it?
So we'll say like this. So the koyach hamaskil, that is the glowing. That's the flame. That's the fire glowing in the coal. Each source, the koyach haseichel hayuli atzmi, is the stone itself, and chochma gluya is a flame, an actual flame that is identified and projects. So, in the words of the Maamar, let's start again. So what is the dugma in the nefesh adam? For what? The shoyrish of chachmas tima. The shoyrish of chachmas tima meaning the koyach hamaskil. So the dugma nefesh adam who are shoyrish the koyach hamaskil. So the shoyrish of chachmas tima is analogous to the shoyrish of the koyach hamaskil. And what is that? Koyach haseichel hayuli or atmish of nefesh, which we are saying is the actual stone itself. That level is removed even from inyan haseichel, right? Inyan haseichel would be the koyach hamaskil, the glowing coal. The koyach hamaskil is only removed deeper than an actual manifested seichel. The glowing coal does not have a flame actually projecting from it. But there is inyan haseichel, the koyach hamaskil, the coal is glowing. The koyach hamaskil, the glowing coal, is still mugdir, defined by yin haseichel. It's glowing, it's hot, and it's warm. Whereas the koyach hayuli atzmi is removed even from inyan haseichel, although it produces it and not something else. Again, the stone produces fire, not something else. So it's but now there's a huge distance between using our moshel still of the actual stone and the spark that it produces or a glowing coal. So because of the great gulf that separates the koyach hamaskil from the pure potential seichel hayuli atzmi, so there isn't a simple, just natural flow from one from the other. Chassidus brings, for the stone lying there forever is not going to produce a spark. It's all a radical process. You got to strike it. Now, this radical process of striking it that will elicit the spark, the kinetic energy that it contains latently, it's like this. It's similar to the inyan. It parallels, I should say, the inyan of tzimtzum, a process, a radical process that's needed to go from the seichel hayuli atzmi to even the koyach hamaskil. And what is that? Behind the shamshachas koyach hamaskil, koyach haseichel hayuli atzmi. So to get the emergence of the koyach hamaskil from the koyach haseichel hayuli atzmi, from the actual tzurach halamish, from the stone, it's only the lowest level, as it were, of the seichel atzmi, that then will become the koyach hamaskil. So all of this to say, that is the upper subtle stroke. So let's be clear in the imagery. The top aleph, the top yud, of the aleph, the chalal is the koyach hamaskil. The top of it is a little stroke. And what's that stroke? That's the lowest level of the koyach hayuli atzmi that became the koyach hamaskil. That's that link. So that's the koyach elyon. Then you have the kavarim is al shacha atzma. Now the whole point is to bring this down into creation, tishtalshalus. And then the koyach tachton noreim the koyach hamaskil. Now the koyach hamaskil. Actually, see it. I'm wrong. He said the Koyach HaMaskil is the lower Yud. That's the Koyach HaMaskil. The whole Aleph is the Memutza between the Koyach HaMaskil and the which Kocham Stimah and the Koyach HaSeichel Yulio Atzmi. Okay, so we have to just let's refine this. Okay, so when he said the Koytza Elyon, I was differentiating between the body of the Yud and the stroke. No, it's one Nakuda. It's three things here. I made five, really. It's three things. Stroke above, stroke below, and a kav. So the stroke above, that is the lowest level of the Seichel Yuli Atzmi, period. The entire, above stroke. Then there's the Amshocha, as it they call it Tzimtzum that he calls it, and then it comes down to the Koyach HaMaskil, and that is the lower, the totality of the lower stroke, all of it. Clear? And the Aleph is the whole picture, right? Chachma Stima, yeah, Chachma Stima emerging from the Ein Sof, which in the Nefesh is Koyach HaMaskil emerging from the Seichel HaYuli Atzmi. Where the Seichel HaYuli Atzmi represented in the Aleph, the upper stroke. The Amshocha is the emergence, and the lower stroke is the emergence of the Koyach HaMaskil. And from there will come Chochma Gluya, Chochma Datzilus, actual Chochma. So the bottom stroke, that is Chochma Stimah, that's Koyach HaMaskil. The whole Aleph is showing us where it emerged from. So it can take us to its source and its emergence. So in totality, it means that the Aleph is not just the Koyach HaMaskil, but the Aleph traces us from the Koyach HaMaskil, Chochma Stimah, to its source from which it comes.
Isn't that Chochma Stimah? It's a mamutza, right? The whole thing. It's a mamutza. Trying to find the dogma.
Yeah, it becomes a mamutza for yeah, it becomes a mamutza for Chochma Gluya, which is Chochma Datzilus. Why is it a mamutza? Because it carries with it a direct connection to the Elyon, talking through Tzimtzum and everything else, but a direct connection. Wherein lies the Elyon? In the upper stroke. That's the connection of Chochma Stimah to the Koyach HaYuli Atzmi, which in Lamaila means Atzmas Ein Sof, or Oil Ein Sof. Yeah, kind of clear. Are we clear with the geography, at least? Now, he had something she didn't say the previous line. So the Koyach HaMaskil itself is alluded to by the bottom stroke. Yud, which is like a Yud. The Fisha Chochma, the Koyach HaMaskil, who dugmas Chochma Gluyim. Yud is like, right, a condensed, very, very seminal expression. Indeed, because the Chochma, as it is a Koyach HaMaskil, is similar to manifested Chochma. And as we know, B'chinas Chochma nirmez is Beis Yud, as explained in the Torah, etc. Chochma is represented by the letter Yud because it's the seminal idea. It's all relative. Like a particular idea is in a seminal form. That's Chochma Gluya. A particular idea in a seminal form. But Koyach HaMaskil is like, it's the seminal idea of all ideas. That's like the source of intellectual process of any kind, not just a particular idea, particular discipline, a particular seichel, and therefore the physical representation of it in the Aleph is this and way of an akudah. Seems to be implying, why doesn't he ask Why doesn't he ask about the upper stroke? Why it's in a way of a yud? Because it's obvious for sure that's the total bittul there. But he adds it's even total bittul at the lower part of the aleph, because it's the koach hamaskil is an union of bittul, just like chokhmah is union of bittul. It's a relatively also non-articulated state. It's all relative. You have a non-articulated state of a particular idea and not a particular articulated state of all ideas. The pure potential for all ideas. Again, operative word here is all relative. Conclusion. So we're up to about the number 11 inside the text, yeah? Zeho sha'alef koi al b'chinas chokhmas timo. So in general, the aleph goes on chokhmas timo, meaning to say its source as well, the whole kit and caboodle, shu memutza bein ha'maitzel atzilus, which is the memutza between the maitzel and atzilus. Lamata Yosen, the same model repeats even a lower, more manifested state, a more articulated state. So even lower, as he said this in the previous maamar, we can identify these three levels of Chachma in manifested Chachma. Shagam, he in the Mezes, based Aleph, the same model repeats again, and expectedly so. Again, relative. It's all the same. It's one Eibishter manifesting himself. So the oneness of the model from potential, from raw state to articulated state repeats itself in relative models. So Chochma Gluya is also the model for what would be the letter Aleph. How? To go from manifested particular idea from Chochma Stimo, Yedei Sidus is, we said this earlier, it's like the idea of the hair. The individual hairs is the emergence of particular ideas. And Chochma Stima, that's like the brain. And then there's the skull that covers that covers the brain. So there we have those three stages: the brain, the skull, and the emergent hairs, which is the way manifested Chochma works. Abba Chochma draws itself from the level of mazel. Now, mazel implies something which the mazel refers to the brain itself, which drips down, comes in, comes out. The brain can produce endless ideas. Particular hairs, particular ideas are produced. And this is all hinted to also in the structure of the letter Aleph. The upper stroke of the Aleph is the source. That would be the brain proper. And the kav is the emergence, which the tzimtzum, the skull, from which the brain has to, as it were, emerge through. And the lower stroke of the Aleph is the actual manifested individual idea. That's also represented by the letter Yud, because the Chachma Gluya in its first stage, Chachma, it's a seminal idea. So it's the same moshel of the Aleph, because he's.
Like we already spoke about the Koach HaMaskil.
Why does he want to bring the other moshel?
I think like it was with the self. Why would we? I'm just trying to understand like.
Because the memutza process repeats again. The three stages repeat again. The three stages need to be repeated again to go from the relative etzem to like a klal, a middle stage, and then etzem klal prat. So he's saying that because that's the reality, the memutza itself, the model of the memutza itself repeats at a very embryonic stage and then in a more manifested stage again. Now, why do we have to know that? Because that's the reality of the way Elikus emerges, parallel within in the Nefesh Adam. So he's saying that Rosh Hashanah, what?
That was the whole month of Bava.
Yeah, so what comes out is it's Rosh Hashanah, he's saying that there's the whole, that the Kesser, the Aleph is removed, everything goes back to its source. Implication here is this, we answered your question, what's the Negeya here? Because this is what happens. Not only is there with the withdrawal of the very sublime first level you described, the parallel being the Kecha Yulei Atzmi, etc., that even Chochmah HaGluya, even the manifested levels of Ishtalshalis are also withdrawn back to their source. It's not just a renewal at a very sublime, very removed level of source of creation, but even at the manifested level. Even that is concealed. It's not like it remains, but its source withdraws. Even the manifested, so what does it mean, Pel Mamish? That Chochmah Gluya is Atzilus. Chochmah Gluya is actually Atzilus. So the Aleph is concealed, Rosh Hashanah, and the Avodah, so it's a withdrawal, and a Pel Mamish take away, a withdrawal, a return back to the source, even of not just the source of creation, Haydn Ishtalshalos. Even in Atzilus Gufra, in our world already, Atzilus Gufra, there's already this, even there is this real withdrawal back to its source. So there's this fundamental change that happens not on some subliminal, deep, volcanic level on Rosh Hashanah. It's a change that is happening even on a relatively manifested level, the lower level of the Aleph and Mutzah, which is Atzilus, which is the Mutzah in general between Ein Sof and Bria. What do you want to say?
But like you're saying, why then the Mashal deciders? It seems like if you follow the same Mashal, it's actually more in line with what the mind is driving at, that we're going from, okay, we went from Kayach HaMaskal Yuli, whatever, to Kayach HaMaskal. And now we're going from Kayach HaMaskal to Chochmah as we generally understand it. So why don't we just continue, why doesn't the mind continue that Mashal and then be much more straightforward?
I think maybe the idea of the cell is to show the whole suit. We don't have so much in the first Mashal. Show how much of change.
This is not just only a moshel. It's not just bringing another moshel. When he says, and the same is true also, look what he says. He's not bringing another moshel. The Mata Yosef, he's talking Lamaila. He's talking Lamaila. So he wants to bring out that the return, the concealment, the Aleph that's concealed Rosh Hashanah, as I just said, that's withdrawn to its source, is not only the deep inner workings and source of Ishtalshalos, but even in Ishtalshalos itself, relatively speaking, there's the withdrawal of Atzilus to its source. It's just telling us a statement, the fact of how dramatic is the Kesser of Rosh Hashanah, not on a deep level higher than Ishtalshalos, the sources of it all, the Pnimius, there's a renewal, a recharge of the whole process of creation. But there's a real change even in Atzilus. Atzilus is withdrawn, as it were, back. Much closer.
And even further, like he concludes in the Maamar, everything that's done, not only in Atzilus, but even things that are done in Asiya, all our actions are also going back to its source. So it's not only Atzilus, everything.
That's a difference. That's a consequence, and that's Pnimius. Look, Rosh Hashanah, after candlelighting, there's still a world. Okay, it's like Chassidus explained, the world is maintained through Chitzonius Harotzah, not Pnimius Harotzah. But where is the fundamental change happening? Not just the consequence of the change. Consequence of the change would be obviously in Ishtalshalos. But where is the change, the actual withdrawal happening? He's saying the withdrawal is not only happening here on a deep internal godly level, but So much so that even on a plane much closer to our world, namely Atzilus, as it's the memutza between Ein Sof and Biyah, even that level of memutza is withdrawn. Not just the memutza between Atzilus and Ein Sof. Yes, he wants to bring out how radical and how tangible is the withdrawal, the keser on Rosh Hashanah. So not another moshel. He's just saying it not doesn't happen here. It happens even at a lower level. You follow? The moshel for that is the nefesh adam, chacham maklui, etc. That will give a moshel to understand what it means. But the point of the maimah is that the keser is happening even here. Kind of clear.